thank you very much for coming. Yeah. So this is a performance and an installation. And my concern, what it's about, is about reality. It's what's real, what's not real, how artists represent reality, and how we can create our own reality. And it's all amazingly brought together in the context of Wilton Street, which is where we are. And so what we started with, or what I started with, quite a well-known piece of art by Duchamp. It's a Napoleon pipe. It's not a pipe. It's a representation of a pipe. So it's the idea of how artists want to talk about things they see and how they represent them. And so that was my sort of starting point, and I could go on about this for quite a long time, but I'm not going to. I'm going to then turn your attention to this remarkable thing here. This is a rock. It's inscribed with the word disbelief. It's incredibly dangerous to stand underneath it. Or is it? Is it real? Well, it clearly is real. You can see it. It's 3 dimensions, so it is real. But it's clearly not quite what it seems to be. And the reason why it's been inscribed as if a tombstone, the word disbelief, is it's referring to the idea of the suspension of disbelief. So I think it's quite funny as a joke, but it's the idea of suspension of disbelief, which is a theatrical idea of when you go to a theatre, you go to a film, you forget that you're in the audience. You get completely drawn in, you get engaged with what's going on stage. And as an audience, you agree to just believe it's reality, to disbelieve that it's a film, disbelieve it's a theatre, it's reality. So you get pulled in. So I'm really, really interested in this idea of what's real, what's not real, our capacity to make things real. And it became really focused for me when I was in France in the 80s, and I'm a surfer, and I was surfing in Biarritz, which is a good place to surf in France. And I met this Welsh guy who told me about the Severn Bore. And the Severn Bore is a tidal wave that runs up the River Severn. The River Severn is quite unusual because it has the Severn estuary has a very high tidal range. And occasionally through the year, a few times a year, it generates this wave that goes all the way up. And here we are, surfing it. And it's an amazing thing to do. And this is true, this is real. I've done it. I served on have you done it? Yeah. Really? Brilliant. So you know the story. So I went there, and the guy who introduced me to it he was a complete fanatic, and he knew when to go when nobody else knew. So because it happens every month, I guess.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
So it's
big ones and little ones.
Yeah. And so he was looking out for the ones which people would think would be little ones, not bother, but were actually quite big ones. And so I went there, and 3 of us surfed it, and we surfed a mile and a quarter, which is a long way standing up. And it is the most surreal experience. It's an incredible experience because you're going up, you're going past trees, you're going underneath bridges, there's fishermen having to bring their lines in before you get snarled up with it. And we surfed it, and we got to a certain point when the river widened a bit, so the wave lost its power, and so we suddenly were in the middle of nowhere. And so we got out and clambered up into a field covered in mud, and at that moment a dung truck on a tractor went past full of house shit, and he said, "Can I have a lift, please?" And he gave it, and he put us on the back of the dung truck with all the dung, and got us back on the road where we met the guy who had been following us from his van, and we raced up, and we got beyond the wave again and got back on it. And it just really inspired me to think about doing the impossible, doing what appears to be impossible, but actually is doable. And so I decided at that point to set up a religion based on surfing, based on doing the impossible. And the catechism for the religion was, all is myth. When 2 people gather together to share a myth, the myth becomes reality. So it's the idea of dreaming of doing things and actually then finding a way of doing them. And so I set up the second International Performance Surfing Convention, which gave the impression there'd been a first, but it hadn't. So it gave a sense of, substance. And at that time, which was in the 80s, found somebody who had the first motorized surfboards. And then we created these performances surfing in the wrong direction, out to sea. And did a whole series of things, which I could talk about for half an hour, but I won't. And so that then got me thinking about the art I was making and how I could make something really quite impossible, but make it real. And so I was inspired by Christo, who's this artist here, who famously, he wrapped buildings, he wrapped trees, he wrapped islands, mountains. He wrapped along the Australian coast for 30 odd miles. And I went to see this piece of work being made in New York, which is where he wrapped Central Park, in this case, as you see, with arches of cloth. And so I was inspired by the idea of wrapping, but also I was inspired by a guy called Manzoni, who is probably the precursor of conceptual art. He was very much ahead of the game. And he was very anti-establishment, anti-art establishment, anti-galleries. And he decided to make a piece of work, which is a limited edition of 90 cans of his own shit. And he canned his own shit. And he sold it, for the first time in New York for $36, which was the same weight as gold. So the weight of the can he then sold it for the same as if it had been made of gold. And he sold it, and subsequently it worked as a gig. He sold it again and again. And most recently, it sold for, I think, $280,000 for one can. So it was an immensely successful piece of quite confrontational art, which I love very much. So I then, inspired by him, he also said he wanted to draw a line around the world. And so for the millennium in 1999, I decided I was going to make a piece of work that would wrap the world, referencing conceptual art, referencing his idea of drawing a line, referencing Christo. So I was very interested in the idea of how could you make a piece of work that conceptually brought the world together, that actually looked at the world, looked at humanity, looked at the whole thing. And so my colleague is now going to start doing something. So I went to Sky Park, and the other elements to it were, at this point in the millennium, the world is not all Christian, yet the measurement of the millennium was based on the Christian calendar. People seem to embrace it even so. It was also the time when analog was going to digital, and it was quite critically so. And so this piece of work celebrated those things or commented upon those things, but it also was very much about the world and the earth that we live in. And so at Sky Park, I don't know if you know it, it's a building overlooking the river. I set up 2 fax machines, one of which was, I had a piece of work, a piece of paper, which is about 100 meters long, that I started feeding into the fax machine. And as I fed it into the fax machine, I started making marks on it. And it was dialed directly into Johannesburg. And that connection was a wire connection. It wasn't using Wi-Fi or anything like that. It was solid wire. And in Johannesburg, it was on a table. And as the work came out onto the table, it went over the table and went into a second fax machine that was dialed into Delhi. And as the work traveled over the table, the artists in Johannesburg added their marks to my marks. And in Delhi, the same thing happened. And the artists in Delhi then added their marks to my marks in the Johannesburg art. And that then was dialed into Sydney. And in Sydney, it was dialed into New York. And in New York, it was dialed into Porto. And in Porto, it was dialed back to Glasgow, where it started to emerge, these images started to emerge in the second fax machine, and I was still feeding the first fax machine in. And at that point, a child picked up the emerging facts and the departing facts and became a human link in a work of art that wrapped the world. Thank you. I neglected to invite Guinness Book of Records, but I did invite the BBC, and the BBC covered the entire thing and broadcast it live to 1.4 billion people in 76 countries. And then I organised for all the paper, because in each place there's different paper. I brought all the paper back and then had an exhibition at the Gallery of Modern Art where we presented it all. And then we put together an edited version of it, which you're about to see now. And that I then printed onto this paper because, as you know, fax paper, everything disappears over time. And so this is a faithful, limited edition reproduction of a work of art, or the if you like, the output of a work of art that wrapped the world. But the key thing,
only part of it.
Yes, yeah. But the thing is that as I talk to you now about it, the work is stronger in your minds than it is here. This is an artifact. This is a kind of representation that allows me to talk about what happened. But actually, the work is in your head, and that's the only place it's ever going to really be. This is Wrap the World. My faithful colleague, Simon, let it go. So you can inspect. I'm just going to come through here, just so you can have a look. So that was Wrap the World, which takes us back to Wilton Street. And here we are on Wilton Street. And really my thinking, what really got this all going, and the thing about Wilton Street is that we go out on the street and you meet people. Maybe you haven't met them before. We're meeting now. You know, things happen on the street, and you meet your neighbours. You have networks. You have friends. You have families. You have this whole community. And Jack, my son, goes to Hillhead, and you go into his classroom, and you've got people from all over the world. And it just seemed to me that the final piece of work in this here, and I'm going to have to. No, I can do it. The final piece of work was I thought, right, I'm going to make a cocktail. A Wilton Street Wrap the World cocktail that represents the fact that here we all are, we come from all over the place, and this is it. So, to tell you about this is my grandfather's. It's not actually what it says on the bottom; it's something else. My grandfather, amazingly, when Duchamp did The Fountain, the famous urinal thing in New York, the same year my grandfather rode to war on a horse. He was in the Great War. He was in the cavalry. It's incredible. So the invention of modern art happened at the same time, but they're still fighting as if it's the previous century. But my granddad was also, and he learned to speak French, and he got invalidated out. And when he got invalidated out with gas, he was told he had 6 months to live. And he was nursed by the woman who became my grandmother, and he eventually died at the age of 94. So he managed okay. Now, he also invented this cocktail. And in my family, it's a family cocktail. And the way it works is that each generation passes it down and adds it on a bit. So he started it, then my dad did it, then I did it, and here we are at Wilton Street. How many of you who would like to have one? I'm afraid I can't give you one of these beautiful things because we haven't got enough of them. But anybody who'd like one, thank you very much for coming. It's been fabulous. We're going to do a toast in a minute. So, Simon, come on down. Simon very kindly has been actually videoing the previous versions of it. But if you just like to pass these around, it is alcoholic. If you don't want alcohol, I have a non-alcoholic version. You can't. It's very important you don't drink it quite yet.
You can get a very small one, like it tastes all right. Thank you.
There's a small one.
Thank you.
Keep going. Anybody, just tell me when to stop. I'll keep. Simon has been very patient. This is the third version I've done today. Who hasn't got yet?
Yeah, that's fine then.
Keep going. Yes.
We can take in this.
Oh yes, definitely. Even better.
Lovely.
Yeah. Right. Has anybody not got one? Anybody like? You got one?
Molly,
Oh,
Molly, so I'm going to say hello to you. They're
hello.
the mocktail variety.
Who hasn't? Simon. Anybody else?
Is this a family photograph or is this unrelated to this a family?
Well, that's another story. I'll come to that in a moment, but we'll just get this one done. So, the toast is, this is a Wilton Street Ratwell toast.
Asking for a different mocktail.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'm just, well, very lucky you get the special one.
Oh, that's plenty lovely. Thank you.
Kombucha.
And another one. We'll share.
Anybody else? Is that a
We'll
drink?
share.
Get in there.
Thank you. Was kombucha. You have no cups left. Thank you.
Thanks. So, okay. Nearly there. So, the coast is to family, friends, neighbours, community, all humanity, and our home, the earth. Cheers. Cheers, 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 cheers.